one of a part 2 series where today we're going to talk about Teams Chat best practices. I'm Nathan Austin. I'll be presenting today, and Stephanie Kingsley will be producing behind the scenes. So a couple housekeeping items as we get going. Thanks for attending, first of all. Second of all, there's a Q&A panel on the side on your right-hand column. We are going to go through this prescriptive session in about 30 minutes. And then afterwards, we're going to open up for questions. But by all means, at any time throughout the presentation, if something strikes you as you want to ask a question, don't wait till the end. Please go ahead and put it in the Q&A panel at that moment so we can make sure to capture it, and we will visit all of those at the end of the presentation. So today, we are really going to talk about one of the challenges that we've been seeing across our clients, as well as a challenge that we as MyTech had, is how do we not just use the tools or define the different features and capabilities of the tools like Microsoft Teams, but how do you really drive adoption of the use of these tools? You're already investing as an organization in these tools, or you're thinking about investing in these tools. So how do we make sure that we can help your team actually leverage that and get the benefit of using them? So that's what we're going to talk about today, specifically around chat. So we are going to be prescriptive in this session and kind of give you some how-tos and some recommended steps. We're saying this isn't necessarily the only way to use it. These are just some of the ways in which we've learned and we've seen across lots of different organizations that can be beneficial and easy starting places to go with regard to driving adoption. One of the things about driving adoption, though, it's not just about the technology. There are organizational decisions and organizational steps that we recommend, at least at a high level, that'll help you drive adoption by making some organizational choices and training. We'll go into those in order to drive adoption. Then we'll go into, well, what are some of the common problems that organizations face that using Teams Chat can actually solve? Again, not saying it's the only way to solve the problem, it's just this is one of the ways that Teams Chat can solve those problems. Then we'll get into the demonstration of those particular chat best practices, and finally some Q&A, as well as some recommended action items and next steps for you if you want to try and drive adoption of Teams Chat inside of your organization. Okay, without further ado, let's get in. But 1 minute about MyTech, I always like to throw in there. MyTech, we are not a training organization. We are a small and medium business IT and technology consulting and services organization. We, over the last 20 years, have learned a lot about technology, and it doesn't mean that we have the only way of doing it, but we've learned a lot about a proven IT strategy that we know in collaboration with our clients can deliver proven results. And that's typically what our clients want, is a consistent outcome from their technology investments. We don't pretend that we're going to solve all your problems, because not all problems are technology problems. And we understand there's lots of other challenges that you face outside of IT. We're just hoping by working with you that we can at least remove some of the IT problems that you have, or most of the IT problems that may come about. Then we also coach our team to make IT easy for you, our client. Doesn't mean we're perfect at that, doesn't mean we always accomplish that. However, our goal is to make IT easy for you. And if you don't feel that we've done that, I always welcome and invite people to let us know how we can improve to make sure that we have your perspective. And finally, by putting all that together, the proven IT strategy, collaborating to help remove IT challenges, and making IT easy for you, we've found that our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity out of their IT investments. Those are the proven results that I was talking about. Enough about MyTech. That's not why you're here. I just want to make sure you know a little bit about us. So let's dig into some of the organizational steps and common problems to solve relative to Teams Chat. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time here in discussion than our typical sessions where we've gone quickly into the demonstration. We are going to get to the demonstration, but with relative to driving adoption, we're talking about modifying and helping adapt people's behavior, which is more complicated than just the clicks that you can make relative to enabling certain features in technology. So here are some of the steps that we recommend. They're not necessarily in this exact order. However, these are some of the ones that in a general order. For instance, identify the team where you want to collaborate, and identify some of the problems you're trying to solve. From a communication and collaboration perspective, one of the things that we've learned through the different training events that we've hosted over the last couple of years, multiple times a month, is that while we all are different organizations in different industries and different sizes, we all have similar communication and collaboration challenges. The important part, though, is that you identify the challenges that are most impactful to you, and that can get you some quick wins. Really, something simple, something your team can adapt and use quickly. Once you've kind of understand that and started identifying those, choose the tool or tools and the purpose. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. MyTech we were actually using, before Teams came out, we were using Skype for Business, and then we were using Slack. So we had different groups and different departments in our organization that were using two different tools for communication. And so no wonder our teams couldn't communicate, because we were using two different tools to try and communicate together. So we had to make an organizational decision, and this is the decision point. We had to choose, as a business, we are going to use Teams. So we identified that that's what we're going to do, and then we it's kind of later, is we planned a transition period to go from Skype and Slack, is what the two tools we're using, to Teams, and we allowed for some transition period before we basically removed Slack and removed Skype from our organizational applications. So that's one of the things I mean, is that part of the step in this is to choose which tools, and that's an organizational decision, not a technology one. Finally, next, one of the things we highly recommend is identifying internal power users. And as a shameless plug, we have our first Friday Power User Group this Friday, May 1st, and it'll be the first Friday of every month. And this is more for those people that will be helping in the organization, like approve teams, help create the consistency of the structure so that you're applying the methodology as similar as possible across your organization. And we want to help those power users get better at what they do. So identify who they are and encourage them to attend our first Friday Power User Group. I do recommend doing training with the managers and supervisors. One of the challenges that we've learned, even amongst managers, leaders, department heads, supervisors, etc., is that we found that there are a couple different personality types that you might encounter when you're looking even at your managers. This also applies to your team members too, by the way, is that some people have their mind, the way their mind works and the way their personality works is that they'll understand the business problem you're trying to solve over here, and they'll be able to connect the dots to, here are capabilities of this tool over here, and they're able to see the two and see the power of connecting those and seeing how this tool can solve this business problem. Those are great folks to be able to involve in a pilot session or to get involved in the initial training and rollout and definition of how to use these tools. Because the other personality type or the way I've seen people's minds work around this is that some people just want to be told, please just tell me how you'd like me to use the tool. They don't want to get caught up in all the different options and all the different capabilities and all the different features. They want to just be told and documented and proceduralized, this is how we want you to use this tool. Please do it this way. So you'll get kind of two sides of that personality in your organization. And so if you can at least identify who those people are, you want to engage the former in the creation versus the latter in the implementation and rollout. Just be aware of that. That'll hopefully help you avoid some maybe challenging interaction and frustration of your team. Then once you've kind of identified that, do some team training. I do recommend considering a pilot group, maybe a pilot department where you've got maybe one of the department heads is one of those creators, and they can then help refine how to use that, and then that might help you roll it out to your organization better. Again, each organization is going to be different, but these are just some suggestions for you to think about as far as how it might make sense for you to drive adoption inside your organization. Then I would also encourage, once you've got your team trained, immediately, if you can find ways to build the use of the tool, in this example, I'm going to talk about chat, into your daily, weekly, or monthly operational rhythm. If you just train on a tool and you don't give any reason for people to modify their behavior, like building it into your weekly rhythm or your communication rhythm, then the training is going to get lost and you won't be able to reinforce it. So if you think about the ways you can build it into your operational rhythm, that'll help your team use the training that you just covered and taught them to be able to apply it to their world, and then help them apply it to their world. So that's kind of the reason for that logic there. Again, plan for some transition period. It's not going to happen instantaneously. We can make the technology clicks really quickly to enable these features or to teach people how to use these features, but people's behavior takes a little bit longer to adapt. Okay, that's obviously not anything that's new to you, but it's just recognize that and then it's okay, and give yourself some grace in that regard. Finally, I would recommend iterating and finding how you can improve over time. One of the simple things you can do is just, if you identify the power user or users, and you can enable your team to make suggestions on how to improve, or intentionally maybe have a roadmap as far as, hey, we're going to turn on and be intentional about these features to start, but we have this kind of additional plan to roll out more features as our team gets comfortable with the first set of features. So there's a couple different ways to do that, and it's an and/or comment, but these are some of the things that if you're not doing these things, or if you haven't thought through some of these areas, you might have more challenges rolling this out and getting adoption. So these are just some things we've learned, again, working with hundreds of clients over the last several years relative to Teams, as well as other tool sets, and we hope that these are some of the things you can consider as you move forward. Okay, with that said, so this is kind of driving adoption in general. It doesn't necessarily apply specifically to chat. These are just some of the things to consider. But then here's some specific things that we found, that common problems that organizations have that chat can actually solve. So I'm going to cover these really quickly, and then I'll demonstrate some of these individually. So one, nearly every time I ask the question, how many of you get too much email? Hands shoot up. So this is actually a way where we can reduce the quantity of email, because if you can potentially suggest internal email, internal communication goes via chat or Teams, you can actually reduce a lot of that volume. And I'll show you a couple of those ways. It's a way for you to reference a company directory. I know that oftentimes going into Outlook and checking a company directory or the address list isn't always easy if I'm in Teams. You can actually, if you're intentional about building contact information into your user information, like your contacts, you can actually make it a company directory. You can easily share documents confidentially. One of the easiest ways I like that is being able to share confidential documents with my direct reports, my team members that I need to share something that's confidential to them, or vice versa. Chat gives you a really easy way to do that. Shared notes that are confidential, like if you have one-on-one communication, for example, could be one-on-one collaboration on documents, one-to-many collaboration on documents or notes. One of the things that I like with chat is you can acknowledge communication, and it's faster communication. So I'll show you what that means through this session as well. And one of the things I really like about chat and the way Teams integrates with your Outlook calendar and your presence is knowing if someone's available. I can see if they're in a meeting. I can see if they're away. I can see if they're at a glance. I can see if they're out of office. There's several things there that you can use with chat that are common problems that just enable they can enable better communication inside your organization. Okay, so I've said a lot, enough talking. Let's dig into some of the key capabilities of actually getting into chat and showing some of the capabilities of Teams. Okay, so I want to start by reducing the quantity of email. So one of the reasons why I'm just highlighting this is the Teams chat window. So in Teams, really what I'm talking about is this tab. Now, granted, some internal communications isn't always going to be just in chat. It could be in Teams channels. I'm going to acknowledge that for the sake of this conversation. However, I'm just going to focus on chat. I really like how, and Stephanie, I just realized I'm going to send you a quick note, or if you could send me a quick note in a chat, that would be great. So I pulled up Stephanie here, and notice at a glance, I see Stephanie, she's in a meeting. Now, Stephanie didn't set that she's in a meeting. This is set merely because on her calendar, she is scheduled for this presentation right now at this time. And so her availability is automatically showing me that she is in a meeting. So that's one of the things that I like about the availability. But so Stephanie just sent me a message right down here. Now, think about this, if this was an email and I wanted to let her know, or she gave me a heads up, like for instance, this message she just sent, did you see the document I sent you? I could quickly and easily, if this was an email, I'd have to click reply and I'd have to type it out and then I'd have to click send. But instead, what I can do is I can just come in here, hover over the message, and I can click my thumbs up. So I can give her an acknowledgement that I saw it. Now, granted, if she said hi, Nate, I'd want to say hi back, right? And I call her SK. So, but that's instead of having to send an email back, I can actually choose a reaction that helps me. And then Stephanie reacted to my message too, gave me a thumbs up. So that's a couple of ways where you can, in a chat, it's really easy to, and it's much simpler and more immediate if just sending communication one-on-one and being able to acknowledge a conversation really quick and easily, as opposed to just sending an email back saying okay, or sending an email back saying got it or thanks. You can do that much quicker here with fewer keystrokes and fewer clicks inside of chat. So part of it is, again, it's one of the ways to help drive Teams adoption when you're considering chat is to think about, instead of sending that email internally. And again, I've been using Teams for 2 years, and I still have to remind myself from time to time to use chat or to use Teams instead of sending an email. So give yourself some grace. That's okay. But basically, consider suggesting that internally, instead of sending email, send chat or Teams messages. And again, it allows your team to reduce the overall volume of email, because instead of this click on a like being an email, it's just a click of an acknowledgement. So Stephanie didn't have to get another email that she had to click out to open or mark as read when I sent her a reply, when all I needed to do is just acknowledge by sending a like. So it's quicker communication, and it's actually so it's faster communication. It's also easier to acknowledge, and by using these tools, it actually reduces the total amount of volume of email that you're getting, which I know that a lot of people from our sessions, they said that that's something they'd like to be able to do. Can't necessarily stop that externally, but internally, it's definitely some ways in which you can curb that. Okay, so next I'm going to go and show company directory. So not everyone on this cast, on this session or watching, will be able to have access to this area. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually open up the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. One of the things that I'll show you is that if you log into office.com, and it'll show you the applications to which you have access. So only a few people may or may not would have access to this section, or you only want a subset of people to have access to the Admin Center. And so what I'm illustrating here is in the Admin Center. And this is something, if you're working with a company like MyTech or MyTech, this is an area where we can help you, in that when we set up, for instance, you go to the users section and you go to active users. One of the things you can do is you can actually put contact information in there. So I'm going to pull up Stephanie, for example. So I can click on Stephanie's user account. And basically, I can put information in as far as, this is Stephanie's LinkedIn photo, so I just uploaded her photo. It has, of course, her email information, but down here, you notice I have this option to manage contact information. So I can put in more information. I mean, how many of you have tried to remember or find someone's cell phone if they wanted to have that on file, or what department are they in, or what's their title, or especially depending on the size of your organization or multi-location in your organization, having people's picture associated with their profile could be really beneficial. So for instance, I was able to put Stephanie's office phone down here. This is not Stephanie's mobile phone. Stephanie actually works out of the Minnesota office, not the Colorado one, but I wanted to illustrate this is our Colorado office address. And again, I just put in a phone number in there. But if you do this, and again, I just made this change about half hour before this presentation because I wanted to be able to illustrate this. When I hover over Stephanie in Teams, it should show it, but it's not. So basically, when you hover over, it would show all that contact information. It would show, this is where I can view the organization that Stephanie's a part of if I've built that out in that section. But mainly when you hover over someone's user profile, that'll show that information. It's interesting because when I go back to the admin console, notice my picture up here. I updated my pic. I know it's really small in what you're seeing, but I actually added my picture to my profile, and it's showing up here that I'm logged in as myself because I added my picture profile. So it's just, right now it's syncing over to Teams. So sorry about not being able to actually show that, but my picture would show up here. And when I hover over myself, I could change my picture here. Actually, let me show you how I can do that. Upload picture. I actually go to my downloads, click that in there, hit save. And so now my picture shows up there. So that's something that we actually encouraged and we had kind of prescribed, if you will, to our team. Hey, click on your picture here, go ahead and upload your picture. And that way it helped us with the company directory for new folks to be able to see people's pictures and put a face with a name, so to speak. So using the company directory is really helpful. I mean, the other way that company directories oftentimes show up is if you're in Outlook, there's this address book little item here, and you can click on address book. And then you could choose Stephanie, and I could pull that up, and I could click on phone notes. Like this is the alternative to be able to do that. Is you basically, again, I'll show that again in Outlook. You could go to address book. You could choose the person, double click on them, then you can click on phone notes, and it hasn't synced to this area yet, but that's the other way in which you could this information can be accessed. But inside of Teams, it's so much easier because you just hover over their contact. If this is someone you're chatting with, and let's say I wanted to pick up the phone and call Stephanie, I could just hover over and get her contact information. The other way that it acts as a directory is that if, like, sometimes written communication doesn't do itself justice. You aren't able to have as clear because you're not the intonation of your voice and facial expression. Well, I could also, if I'm chatting with Stephanie, instead of having to pull up the company directory and figure out what's her extension or what's her cell phone, I could actually just call her right here. I could either do a video call or I could do an audio call. Either way works. I could also really quickly do a screen share in the chat as well to be able to pull up and share the screen with Stephanie. So it allows me to do really quick one-on-one collaboration. So it goes instantly from a chat and acknowledgement to seeing that I want to do a video call, do just an audio call instead of adding video, and or to share screen. So you can do all of these things on a one-to-one basis, as well as notice over here, I've got a one-to-many. I actually have a few different people in this chat. I've renamed it Gerald and Stephanie, and so I can do the same thing here with Gerald and Stephanie. If I'm conversing with them, by the way, one of the things that's also nice, because this can call people immediately, is to potentially suggest, hey, are you ready to chat? Are you ready to start the meeting? Instead of just calling them out of the blue, a little bit of a courtesy when working from home. So then I could quickly click start the meeting right here. And then if I started it, Gerald, if he was joining, could also join in because it would show up as an option up here for him to be able to join. So it allows me to not only chat with them individually, acknowledge their notes, as well as quickly share screen, call, or video chat with them as well. The last thing that I'll show relative to kind of this chat and collaboration is really document sharing. So one of the things in the Files tab, notice there is just like in many areas of Teams, in the individual chat, if I just wanted to share a confidential document with these two, with Gerald and Stephanie, I could share and upload that here. So I can click share, for instance. I'm going to upload from my computer. And let's say if I wanted to share this document with them into our chat, I can do that. Notice it's uploading and it's going to pop in here. And now I'm only sharing that document. I have to hit a little bit of a refresh here. Now I'm only got to click out and click back in. Sorry. It's one of the idiosyncrasies. Now that document is there, and it by default, it only shares it with the people that are in this chat. So now if I wanted to do that with Stephanie individually, I could also pull up files here, and these are only files that are shared with Stephanie, only files that she can see and that we can collaborate on. So it solves a permissioning and a security problem that oftentimes was had other than emailing these documents back and forth. That was really in the past one of the only ways, unless you did really complicated security permissions inside of your folder structure, which is really hard to maintain and not always reliable. This enables you to be able to have secure one-on-one document collaboration or one-to-many by creating having multiple people in the chat. If you want to add more people into chat, by the way, you just got to click over here and say, I want to add participants, and I could choose to add people, for example, like another contact that's in our organization. So that's how you can do that. And notice when you add people, it does ask you, do I want to do not include chat history, include chat history from a certain number of days, or include all chat history? So I could choose whether or not I'm going to expose this new person to any of the previous chat. So it allows you to do some quick ad hoc collaboration as well when you're when you're working as a team. So let's say you want to invite somebody into the collaboration that you didn't originally intend. Well, great. You can say, hey, I realize we need to add Jan in here, but I don't want her to see anything from the past. No problem. I'm going to click add. Now she's added to the group. And then anything moving forward, Jan will have access to. So, and then I could also come up here and rename the chat and say, this is a Gerald, Jan, and Stephanie chat. Or one of the things that I've done before is call it, this is the name of project team, right? So I could call it whatever the project is, so that way in my chat it's really easy to be able to use. The other thing that I like about that speeds up the communication as I'm over here is in email you can't really do this, but in chat you can, where if you hover over the person or the group, notice these little breadcrumbs appear on the side. You can actually pin these. So I want to pin this one to the top, and I want to pin Stephanie to the top too, because these are the two groups that I communicate with most regularly. Once this project team is kind of done or expired or over, I can actually come up here and just unpin, and then that goes, it'll just fall into my string of chat conversations. So those are just several things you can do with chat to really drive some adoption. The last thing, when I go into like a one-on-one, for example, I like that you can add tabs to you can add tabs to a chat. And so for instance, we've added a tab here that is OneNote. So by clicking I'll show you how to do it. You click the plus tab here, and you can choose OneNote. You could also choose a Word document. You could link to other external resources as well if you wanted. In this example, I prefer and I choose OneNote. So I added OneNote. I just clicked on OneNote, and I I could either add an existing one or add a new one. I already added one, so I'm not going to go through that. But basically, I added a OneNote notebook, and this allows us to have potentially one-on-one notes, a standing agenda for our one-on-one, shared notes, and I can also add some different action items in here for Stephanie and I as we work together. So one of the best ways I've found to drive adoption of Teams Chat is by using that building into your operational rhythm that I mentioned earlier, is build it into your one-on-ones. We did a session, by the way, on how to structure your one-on-ones specifically for team members to manager and supervisor one-on-ones. But use it in your one-on-ones. It forces your team member to get into it. The other thing that's a subtle tip that I'd recommend is when you're in your one-on-ones, your team member that's on your team should drive the conversation, should drive the screen sharing, because if you get them to click, you get to see how they're navigating and they get more comfortable with the tool themselves. So these are just some simple tips and tricks and best practices to be able to start simply using chat to be able to drive adoption of these tools. It'll increase your communication, it'll increase your collaboration. You can have confidential communication really easily that's built into the solution as opposed to some other complicated ways of communicating. So I've covered reducing the quantity of email, how you can use it as a company directory, confidential sharing of documents, sharing of notes, one-on-one, one-to-many collaboration, acknowledgement of faster communication in the chat section, as well as how you have the presence and availability indicators. So I already know Gerald's offline, so I didn't have to worry about trying to contact him. So in summary, as I go back, really it's saying that start with some organizational decisions. You got to figure out the organizational decisions that you want. Choose, like if you're trying to solve the problem of Slack and Teams, for example, or Slack and Skype, and you want to bring them together, you just, as an organization, make that decision. Train the trainer and identify the power users. That's going to be key to help you roll this out. I would consider maybe a pilot department or group where the department head or department leader might be one of those power users, where their mind works to connect those dots, the business challenges they're trying to solve and the technology capabilities to help you develop those solutions before you potentially incorporate and roll these out to your team in training. And then, you're really not done until you at least identified a way that you want to iterate and improve. And it could be as simple as, hey, if you got any ideas, send them to the power users, and it's something that they'll work on your behalf. So those are some recommended next steps to be able to drive adoption just with Teams Chat. So identify the problems. I would recommend, if there's any of these takeaways that you'd like to write them down right now, even if it's one or two things, even if it's, download the mobile app of Teams, if that's something you want to do, for example. Try to take some baby steps. And then I would suggest join us for part 2, which is on Thursday, where we're going to take this similar concept, but into the Teams section of Teams. Yes, thank you, Microsoft, for calling the application the same as the section of the application itself. The Teams section of Teams, and some ways in which you can incorporate that in solving some key problems and best practices. And on Friday is our first Friday Power User Group. So encourage your power users to come to that session as well. With that said, thank you all for attending. I know this goes quick, but we're trying to be really prescriptive and share specific best practices that you can think about for adopting for your organization. So if you're able to stick around for the Q&A, great. If you're not, thank you for joining, and stay safe and stay healthy. Stephanie, if you have, let's open it up for